You know, I took a few minutes the other day after Bing gave his talk to go through his budget. And he has what's called a legal budget, which kind of is the charts to talk about where money goes. And when I went through the budget, these are some of what I was able to pick out on where the money is going in this budget. $74 million for what they call sinking interest redemption. That's the debt service on the general fund that goes to the banks. $96 million for the POC swap hedge payment for 2009. That's the money they're paying for the last set of bonds that defaulted, which was supposed to get them out of the crisis. And that means that money is money that directly, the casino taxes don't go anymore to the people of Detroit. They go into a receiver to be paid directly to the banks for debt service. We don't see a penny of that money. It goes directly to the banks. $164 million for water bond interest. $5 million for another water bond series. $207 million for sewage bond and interest. Another $46 million for sewage bond fund series. So while they don't have a penny for a water affordability program, while tens of thousands of people get their water shut off, hundreds of millions of dollars from the collection of water goes directly to the banks. Where's our money going? It's going to the banks. That's where it is. And the banks demand more. This last bond, it wasn't a tax. There's no interest-free bond. They're all interest. And in fact, the new bond money is guaranteed by the state revenue sharing, which is $47 million in the last budget. So that $47 million no longer goes to the people. It goes to the banks to pay off this bond, which was sold to pay off the other bond. It's no different than what happened to Latin America, where under neoliberalism, where the banks seized control of everything. They took advantage of the economic crisis that they created by impoverishing the economies and then put a stranglehold on the public sector to pay for that crisis. And that's where our money's going. We don't have any money for city workers. We don't have any money for city services because it all goes to the banks who are robbing us blind. And where is Bing and them? These banks destroyed the economy of Detroit with predatory lending. 85% of the loans, the mortgage loans in Detroit, are subprime predatory loans. They should be recovering. Those banks owe us hundreds of millions of dollars. Why should we be paying them more? As Abba Yumi said, if we're going to fight, we got to fight the system. You know, it was a nice victory that they stopped the school closing with Bob, but we all know that's going to be a Pyrrhic victory because Bob's going to go to the school board and say, if we don't we don't shut the schools, then we're going to go bankrupt, there's no money, and unless the school board is willing to say, hell with the banks. Hell with it. There's money. The money, we're not going to pay the banks. We're going to put a moratorium on debt service to the banks and say the people come before the banks.
That's right. That's right.
Just one last comment. Sometimes it's hard to raise that. It's a hard idea. But if we don't raise it, we're never going to get to the root of the crisis. The crisis ain't about Bing, it ain't about Bob, it's about capitalism. And it's about the stranglehold of the system on us. In the early 1990s, in the worst period for the working class after the collapse of the Soviet Union, while Cuba was so under the gun, Cuba spoke out, and when the U.S. was going all over the world and impoverishing nation under nation through the IMF and all the banks and putting every country as enslaved to the banks, Cuba called for a moratorium on the debt to the banks. In the worst period, they called it. And they were like a single voice holding out. But now in Latin America, what came out of that? Venezuela had a revolution. Bolivia had a revolution. The supermodels are in power in Uruguay. All over Latin America, the banks are on the retreat and the workers are on the move. Right now, we may seem like we're a voice in the wilderness when we start talking about moratorium on debt service. When we talking about the system, but by talking about the system, putting the onus where it belongs, we're going to wake up the workers to where they really can fight. Because the only way Detroit's going to be reborn is when the working class takes over Detroit. The capitalists have already abandoned Detroit. We gotta take it over and rebuild it, just like the workers are doing in Latin America. In Venezuela, when a factory shuts down, the workers take it over, and the government says, right on, and they subsidize it. That's what should be happening here, and that's what our struggle's about. And as Abayumi said, this is a continuation of the struggle against neocolonialism and imperialism on a worldwide level right here in Detroit. Let's fight it out on its real terms by fighting the real enemy, the capitalist class and the banks. And if we do it, we're going to win.
Yes.